the email sat in my inbox like a time bomb. Subject line, Performance Review Update. I knew what it contained before I even clicked. The same patronizing feedback. The same code words for "you're too ambitious." The same suggestion to focus on your core responsibilities. Translation: stay small, stay quiet, stay in your lane. But lanes are for people who accept limitations. And I was done accepting theirs. My name is Sophie Reynolds, and this is how I went from being the office doormat to owning the entire damn building. It started 3 years ago when I joined Helix Dynamics, a mid-sized marketing firm with big promises about growth opportunities and meritocracy. I believed them, my first mistake. Fresh out of my MBA program where I'd graduated top of my class, I was ready to climb, not for power's sake, but because I had ideas. Good ones, ideas that could transform our outdated business model and bring us into the digital age properly. But Helix had a pecking order. And newcomers, especially female newcomers with opinions, were expected to sit at the bottom and be grateful for the scraps. The thing about Sophie, my manager Martin would say in meetings, speaking about me as if I weren't sitting right there, is that she's got fantastic attention to detail, perfect for supporting roles. Then he'd smile at me, like he'd paid me a compliment while systematically stripping my proposals of anything innovative and assigning me to proofread documents and prepare presentations for the leadership team. All men, of course, except for Diana from HR, who functioned primarily as an echo chamber for the CEO, Richard Kingsley. The problem wasn't that I was bad at my job. The problem was that I was too good, and it scared them. The day everything changed began like any other. I'd spent weeks preparing a comprehensive digital strategy proposal that would streamline our client acquisition process and boost conversion rates by an estimated 34%. The numbers were solid. The research was impeccable. I even created a prototype to demonstrate the user interface. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. I arrived at 9:30 to set up, my confidence bolstered by weeks of preparation and the undeniable logic of my proposal. Martin arrived at 9:55. Glanced at my materials, and said, "Let's wait for the team before you start explaining all this." By 10:15, the conference room was filled with the usual suspects: Martin, Richard, Thomas from finance, Diana from HR, and Jason, a senior account manager who'd been with the company since its founding and who treated the business like his personal fiefdom despite having no actual ownership stake. "Sophie has something she'd like to share," Martin announced, sounding like a kindergarten teacher introducing a 5-year-old's art project. I ignored the condescension and launched into my presentation. For the first few minutes, they listened, or at least pretended to. But when I reached the part about restructuring our client approach, Jason interrupted. "That's not how we do things here," he said flatly. "I understand that," I replied, maintaining my composure. "That's why I'm proposing a change. Our current approach is losing us clients to more agile competitors." Richard shifted in his chair. "Sophie, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but we've been in this business for 20 years. These relationships are built on personal connections, not algorithms." "With all due respect," I countered, "our client retention rate has dropped 18% in the past year alone. These aren't just algorithms. This is about modernizing our entire approach before we become obsolete." The room went silent. Then Diana cleared her throat. "Sophie," she said with practiced HR gentleness, "I think what Richard is trying to say is that perhaps you should focus on mastering your current responsibilities before suggesting company-wide overhauls." "I've exceeded every performance metric for my position," I said, fighting to keep frustration from my voice. "I've brought in 4 new clients this quarter alone. And we appreciate that." Martin jumped in. "But there's a learning curve to understanding the full complexity of our business model. Maybe in a few years." "In a few years, it might be too late," I insisted. "Look at these projections." I flipped to a slide showing our declining market position compared to competitors who'd embraced digital transformation. Jason laughed, and leaned back in his chair. "These tech solutions are fads. Our clients value personal attention, not being treated like data points. They're not mutually exclusive. I argued. We can maintain relationships while improving efficiency. I've already spoken with Westfield Partners, and they're interested in being a pilot client for this approach. The mention of Westfield, one of our largest accounts, shifted the energy in the room. Richard's eyes narrowed. You spoke to Westfield without authorization? I didn't make any promises, I clarified. But during our last meeting, Mr. Westfield mentioned his frustration with our reporting delays. I suggested some improvements, and he was receptive. Martin's face reddened. Westfield is my account. You had no business discussing internal processes with them. They brought it up, I said. Was I supposed to ignore their concerns? You were supposed to direct those concerns to the appropriate channels, Diana interjected, her HR voice now tinged with steel. This is exactly the kind of overstepping that concerns us, Sophie. Richard sighed heavily. I think we've heard enough. Sophie. Your initiative is noted. But I believe Martin has been clear about your role and responsibilities. Perhaps it would be best to focus on those for now. And just like that, my presentation was over. No discussion of the data, no engagement with the ideas. Just a patronizing pat on the head and a reminder to stay in my lane. I gathered my materials while they shifted to the next agenda item as if I'd never spoken. As I headed for the door, I heard Jason mutter, ambitious, but needs to learn her place. The email arrived 3 hours later. Performance review update. I opened it to find a formal warning about exceeding authority and failing to respect established protocols. Martin had included a revised job description with explicitly narrowed responsibilities and a note that future, unauthorized client communications would result in disciplinary action. I stared at my computer screen, a strange calm settling over me. They thought this would make me fall in line. Instead, it crystallized everything I'd been feeling for months. This wasn't about protocols or authority. This was about maintaining a system where the same people always won. Where innovation was sacrificed at the altar of comfort, where my gender and my youth were used as excuses to dismiss my contributions. That night, I didn't cry, I didn't rant, I didn't update my resume. Instead, I opened a new document and began to plan. If they wanted a war, I would give them one. But I wouldn't fight the way they expected. I wouldn't quit in a blaze of glory or file a complaint that would be buried by Diana's department. No, I would win by their own rules. And then I would change the game entirely. Phase 1 began the very next day. I arrived at work early, as usual, but with a new strategy. Instead of pushing my ideas upward where they would be blocked, I started moving laterally. I identified the quiet performers in each department, the ones who did excellent work but, like me, were overlooked. Amelia in graphic design, whose illustrations were brilliant, but who was constantly assigned template work. Derek in IT, who had developed several internal tools on his own time that nobody acknowledged. Zoe in research, who had an encyclopedic knowledge of our industry but was rarely invited to strategic meetings. I love that mock-up you did for the Bellstone pitch, I told Amelia over coffee. It was so much more dynamic than what we usually present. Amelia looked surprised. You saw that? They didn't use it? Said it was too bold for that client. That's ridiculous. It perfectly captured their brand evolution. Have you shown your portfolio to anyone outside Helix? A conversation started. Similar ones followed with Derek, Zoe, and others. Not conspiratorial, not complaining, just genuine appreciation for good work and subtle questions about ambitions and frustrations. I became a collector of overlooked talent and buried ideas. Meanwhile, I became the model employee in Martin's narrow definition. I completed my assigned tasks with precision. I stopped making suggestions in meetings. I nodded pleasantly when Jason recycled my previously rejected ideas as his own 6 weeks later. I forwarded client concerns to appropriate channels and watched them disappear into the void of organizational indifference. Martin was delighted. You've really taken the feedback to heart, he told me during our next one-on-one. This is the kind of team player attitude we need. I smiled and thanked him for his guidance. While playing the perfect subordinate at work, I spent my evenings building something on the side. Using Derek's coding expertise compensated fairly from my own savings, and Amelia's design skills likewise paid. I developed a prototype of the digital platform I'd proposed, a comprehensive client management system with real-time reporting, predictive analysis, and seamless communication tools. But I didn't present it to Helix, not yet. Instead, I reached out to Westfield Partners, not as a Helix employee, but as an independent consultant working after hours. Mr. Westfield remembered our conversation and was intrigued by my follow-up email describing a solution to his reporting frustrations. We met for coffee on a Saturday, where I demonstrated the prototype. "This is exactly what we've been looking for," he said, examining the interface. "You built this yourself?" "With a small team," I acknowledged. "It's still in development, but the framework is solid." "And Helix is finally embracing this approach?" I chose my words carefully. "This is an independent project at the moment. I believe in solutions, not obstacles." He studied me thoughtfully. "Interesting. And what exactly are you proposing?" "A pilot program, no disruption to your current services with Helix, but a parallel implementation of this system for 3 months. If it delivers the results I'm projecting, we can discuss next steps. If not, you've lost nothing. Except the implementation fee," he noted. "There isn't one," I replied. "I'm confident enough in the results to waive any upfront costs. If it works, we can discuss a proper arrangement then." He raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a risk." "Not from where I'm sitting," I said with perfect confidence. "Your data already shows the potential. This is just execution." 2 weeks later, my independent consultancy, consisting of myself, Derek, Amelia, and Zoe, all working evenings and weekends, began implementing our system for Westfield's North American division. We operated with surgical precision, careful not to interfere with Helix's ongoing work. In fact, I made sure our regular Helix deliverables for Westfield were flawless, giving Martin no reason for suspicion. 3 months passed. Our system delivered exactly as promised: faster reporting, clearer insights, and a 23% improvement in campaign response rates. Mr. Westfield was ecstatic. "We need to roll this out across all our divisions," he declared during our review meeting. "And I want to discuss bringing some of our other marketing activities under this umbrella." "I'm glad to hear that," I replied. "I should mention that as this expands, I'll need to formalize the arrangement. My team and I have been operating this as a side project, but a full implementation would require a proper business structure." "Of course," he agreed readily. "Draw up a proposal. And Sophie, I'll need to inform Helix about this transition eventually. They're still handling significant portions of our marketing activities." "I understand," I said. "All I ask is that we finalize our arrangement first. After that, you should absolutely do what's best for Westfield." That night, I registered Reynolds Digital Solutions, LLC. My side hustle was about to become very real. While Westfield remained our only client, I used their success metrics to approach other businesses, carefully avoiding current Helix clients. 2 smaller companies signed on, attracted by our results-based payment structure and innovative approach. We were small but growing, operating entirely outside of business hours. At Helix, I maintained my facade of compliant mediocrity. I watched as our company continued to lose market share. I listened as Richard announced a belt-tightening period and instituted a hiring freeze. I observed as Martin became increasingly anxious about client retention. 6 months into my double life, the inevitable happened. During a regular meeting with Helix, Mr. Westfield mentioned the remarkable results he was seeing from the new system. Martin looked confused. "What new system?" "Mr. Westfield realized his mistake too late. I assumed you were aware. We've been piloting a digital marketing platform for certain campaigns. The performance has been excellent." "This is the first I'm hearing of it," Martin said, his voice tight. "Helix hasn't implemented any new systems for your account?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "It's not a Helix initiative," Mr. Westfield finally admitted. We've been working with Reynolds Digital Solutions. I thought perhaps it was a subsidiary or partnership. Given that, he trailed off, looking at me. All eyes turned in my direction. Martin's face cycled through confusion, realization, and fury in rapid succession. Sophie, he demanded, what is he talking about? I maintained perfect composure. Reynolds Digital Solutions is my company. We've been providing supplementary services to Westfield partners outside of my work hours at Helix. Your company, Richard sputtered. This is a clear conflict of interest. I've reviewed my employment contract thoroughly. I replied calmly. There's no non-compete clause prohibiting independent work in my own time, as long as I don't solicit Helix clients. Westfield approached me after seeing our prototype. After you inappropriately discussed internal matters with them, Martin nearly shouted. I discussed their concerns, which they raised, I corrected. When Helix decided not to address those concerns, Mr. Westfield sought alternatives. I provided one, on my own time, with my own resources. The meeting devolved from there. Martin demanded immediate termination of my side arrangement. Richard threatened legal action. I remained calm, knowing my contract gave them no grounds. Mr. Westfield, uncomfortable with the tension but impressed with my results, suggested we find a collaborative solution. There was no collaboration to be had. The following day, I was called into a meeting with Richard, Martin, and Diana from HR. My access card was already deactivated. I had to be escorted up by security. Your actions constitute gross misconduct, Diana informed me, sliding a termination letter across the table. Helix will be pursuing all available legal remedies for your violation of company loyalty and misappropriation of proprietary concepts. I didn't touch the letter. There's been no misconduct, gross or otherwise. I fulfilled all my duties at Helix while building something separate on my own time. As for proprietary concepts, I believe the meeting minutes from last year clearly show that Helix explicitly rejected the concepts I proposed. You can't claim ownership of ideas you discarded. Richard leaned forward, his voice dangerously quiet. You built a competing business while employed here. You stole a client. I built a business that provides services Helix chose not to offer. And I didn't steal anyone. Westfield is still your client for traditional marketing services. They separately hired my company for digital solutions after you repeatedly refused to modernize your approach. I met his gaze steadily. But if you're concerned about client retention, perhaps you should ask yourself why they were so eager for alternatives in the first place. This isn't over, Martin snapped. You've burned every bridge in this industry. Once word gets out about your disloyalty, I think you mean innovation and responsiveness to client needs, I interrupted. But you're right about one thing. This isn't over. I stood and smoothed my skirt. I'll have my lawyer review this termination letter and respond accordingly. In the meantime, I suggest you focus on your remaining clients. They might be receiving some interesting proposals soon. I walked out of Helix Dynamics for the last time that day, but I wasn't worried. Reynolds Digital Solutions already had 3 clients, a growing team of talented ex-Helix employees. Amelia and Derek had given notice the same morning, and a business model proven to deliver results. The legal threats from Helix never materialized. Their lawyers quickly determined they had no case. Instead, Richard attempted to salvage the situation by announcing a digital transformation initiative that poorly copied elements of my system. But it was too little, too late, and implemented by people who didn't fully understand the vision. Within a year, Reynolds Digital Solutions had grown to 15 employees and a client roster that included 2 former Helix accounts who'd switched after comparing results. We weren't just surviving, we were thriving. With a company culture built specifically to nurture talent and innovation rather than suffocate it. The true victory came 18 months after my departure from Helix. I received an email from a business broker representing an interested party who wished to discuss acquiring Reynolds Digital Solutions. The interested party turned out to be Apex Marketing Group, Helix's largest competitor and the second largest firm in our market. Our negotiations lasted 3 weeks. When we finalized the deal, Reynolds Digital Solutions was valued at $12 million, approximately 40% of Helix's entire market capitalization at that point. I retained leadership of the division within Apex and gained a seat on their Innovation Council. The first major initiative I proposed to Apex's board, the acquisition of struggling Helix Dynamics, which had lost nearly 30% of its client base and was hemorrhaging talent. They're undervalued right now. I explained to Apex's CEO, Gerald Maxwell. Their traditional client relationships still have worth, and their downtown office location is prime real estate. With the right restructuring and integration with our digital platforms, we could extract significant value while eliminating a competitor. Gerald studied the proposal thoughtfully. And you're the right person to oversee this acquisition, given your history with them. Precisely because of that history, I replied. I know exactly where the waste is, where the untapped talent lies, and how to transform their outdated processes. This isn't about revenge, Gerald. It's about smart business. It wasn't entirely true. Of course, the acquisition made perfect business sense, but I'd be lying if I said there wasn't personal satisfaction in the symmetry of it all. 3 months later, I walked into Helix Dynamics offices again, this time as Executive Vice President of Integration for Apex Marketing Group. The receptionist did a double take when she saw me. Word spread quickly through the office, and I could feel the mixture of shock, resentment, and, from some corners, vindication as I made my way to the conference room where the leadership team waited. Richard, Martin, and Diana sat on one side of the table, their expressions ranging from simmering anger to forced professionalism. Jason had apparently left 6 months earlier for a consulting opportunity that everyone knew was a desperate sideways move. Thank you for meeting with me, I began, setting down my portfolio. As you know, Apex has completed its acquisition of Helix Dynamics. I'll be overseeing the integration process, which will take approximately 3 months. This is absurd, Martin muttered, not quite under his breath. I smiled pleasantly. I understand this is a significant change. Change can be uncomfortable, but I want to assure you that we value the institutional knowledge and client relationships that exist here. Our goal is to preserve what works while improving what doesn't. Richard cleared his throat. And our positions in this new arrangement? That's partly why I'm here today, I replied, opening my portfolio. I'll be conducting individual assessment interviews with all department heads and key personnel over the next 2 weeks. These evaluations will help determine optimal placement within the integrated structure. So we're essentially reapplying for our jobs, Diana said flatly. To you. Think of it as an opportunity to highlight your contributions and vision for the future, I suggested. Apex values innovation and adaptability. Those who demonstrate those qualities will thrive in the new organization. The subtext was clear to everyone in the room. 3 years ago, they had told me to stay in my lane. Now I owned the highway. And they were driving on it with expired licenses. The integration period was intense but productive. True to my word, I evaluated each person based on their skills and potential rather than personal history. Many Helix employees transitioned successfully to Apex. Others, including Martin, opted for severance packages. Richard was offered a senior advisory role with limited authority, a golden parachute that allowed him to save face while removing him from decision-making. Diana surprised me by embracing the change wholeheartedly. During her evaluation interview, she admitted, Helix's culture was broken long before you arrived. Sophie, I was part of maintaining a system I knew was flawed because it seemed easier than fighting for change. I regret that now. Her honesty earned her a position leading a new talent development initiative at Apex, one specifically designed to identify and nurture innovative thinkers regardless of their tenure or background. The former Helix offices were remodeled and became Apex's digital headquarters, with the corner office that once belonged to Richard transformed into a collaborative workspace where teams could develop and test new ideas. A small but meaningful symbolic change. 2 years later, Apex had doubled its market share and been recognized as one of the most innovative companies in our sector. The digital solutions division I led had expanded to include international clients and branched into emerging technologies. The victory was complete by any measure. But the true satisfaction came from something less tangible than market share or profit margins. It came from watching Amelia present her design vision to the entire company and seeing it adopted as our new brand direction. It came from Derek being promoted to Chief Technology Officer after his infrastructure overhaul saved the company millions. It came from Zoe leading our research department and mentoring new analysts. It came from building the company I'd always envisioned, one where lanes didn't exist, only open roads and possibilities. On the third anniversary of the acquisition, I found myself working late, reviewing plans for our next expansion. A notification popped up on my computer, a message from Mr. Westfield, still a client and now a friend. Saw your company featured in Business Innovators. Remembered that coffee meeting when you showed me a prototype on your laptop? Sometimes the smallest moments change everything. Congratulations on building something remarkable. I smiled and glanced around my office, not a corner suite, but a glass-walled space in the center of our collaborative floor plan. Through the walls, I could see teams still working, engaged and energized despite the late hour. People whose talents might have been overlooked in another environment, just as mine had been. They had told me to stay in my lane. Instead, I had reimagined the entire roadmap, and we were just getting started.